You have a kid? Then this date is over." The words landed with the sharpness of snapped glass, cutting straight through the soft jazz drifting across hearth and vine. The bistro was glowing with Christmas decor, golden lights, wreaths dusted with faux snow, cinnamon rolls steaming on plates, but none of its warmth reached Marcus Johnson as the woman across from him grabbed her coat and marched toward the door. Conversations dipped, spoons paused mid-air, and a few diners exchanged looks that hovered between pity and curiosity. Marcus had felt eyes like that on him his entire life. The quiet judgment older folks often recognize instantly because it hides behind polite smiles. Tonight, that judgment tasted sharper than usual. He exhaled, tried to steady the sting behind his ribs, and reached for his water glass just to give his hands something to do. The condensation slipped against his fingers as if even the glass didn't want to stay. He hadn't even mentioned being a widower yet. Just the part about being a father was enough to send her running. He supposed the rest would have crushed the evening entirely. Naomi, his daughter, his world, 8 years old, wild about squirrels, capable of making him laugh even on days he barely felt alive. And now, once again, she was the reason someone saw him as a burden instead of a possibility. Above the gleaming silverware, he caught the reflection of the ring on his finger, the simple band he still wore though his wife had been gone 6 years. A quiet symbol, not of refusal to move on, but of a promise he had never quite figured out how to stop carrying. Maybe, he wondered, that promise was part of why he kept finding himself alone at tables like this. He folded his napkin, placed it on the plate, and prepared to stand. Then a woman at the next table spoke. "If you ever need a husband." She paused, and Marcus turned, expecting sarcasm. The woman's voice was low, steady, strangely sincere. "I'm looking for one." She said it with the calm certainty of someone offering directions, not a marriage proposal. Marcus blinked, unsure if he'd misheard. The stranger, mid-30s maybe, light olive skin, dark waves of hair pinned behind one ear, held his gaze without the slightest flicker of humor. Her eyes were clear, observant, almost lonely. He straightened slightly. "Are you mocking me?" She shook her head. "No. I heard what she said, and I don't tolerate cruelty." Her words were clipped, elegant, shaped by someone used to boardrooms and microphones, the sort of woman who seemed carved from confidence. Yet behind her poise, there was an undertow sadness disguised as composure. She extended a hand across the empty space between their tables. "My name is Elena Hart." He hesitated before shaking it. Marcus Johnson," she finished for him, nodding toward the reservation card the hostess had placed earlier. "I wasn't trying to intrude. I just thought no one should sit alone after being spoken to like that." He let out a weak laugh. "You don't have to rescue me. I'm not rescuing you," Elena replied softly. "I'm saying I recognize something." Something in the way she said it made him pause. She wasn't pitying him. She was identifying with him. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked. Her eyes dropped to the charm hanging from her bracelet, a tiny silver rabbit, no bigger than a dime. She touched it absent-mindedly, like someone seeking courage from a familiar talisman. "I know what it feels like," she said, "to be dismissed because of circumstances you didn't choose." For a moment, the bistro faded, music, chatter, the clinking dishes, all receding behind the honesty of her tone. "I can't have children," she said simply. "My last engagement ended because of it." Marcus's breath caught. "I'm sorry." She nodded once, as if accepting condolences she'd grown used to. "I thought love meant partnership. Apparently, it meant producing heirs." The bluntness made him wince on her behalf. He studied her again, this composed, elegant woman who looked like she belonged in a magazine spread. And yet she sat here confessing a wound as deep as his own. It made no sense. None of it made sense. So what was that? "That thing you said?" he asked. Elena's lips curved into a faint, wry smile. "Ah, that. Yes, that. Well," she said lightly, "I meant it. Partially. I don't know you. But I know what I want, a family. Not status, not optics, not someone perfect. Just someone who wants to build something real. Marcus frowned. And you think that someone is a man you overheard getting dumped? I think, she replied, that someone who loves his child enough to keep trying after all the times he's been rejected is probably a good man. The words hit him harder than the rejection had. He didn't know where to put them. Compliments from strangers were rare, sincere ones, rarer still. But the part he couldn't ignore was the instinct inside him whispering that this conversation wasn't normal. Nothing about it followed the rules of how relationships began. I can't just say yes to something like that, Marcus said finally. I don't expect you to. I have a daughter, he added, as though stating the obvious would end the entire ridiculous moment. Elena nodded. I heard. She's the center of my life. I imagine she should be. I can't let anyone hurt her. Nor would I, Elena said quietly. That answer unsettled him, not because it was wrong, but because it felt too genuine, too intentional, too ready. Look, he said, rubbing his forehead, you seem kind, but I don't know you, and whatever you're hoping for, it's not me. Elena accepted his refusal with a small breath, but her eyes softened rather than dimmed. Then let me say just one more thing, she murmured. Hope can enter through very unexpected doors, even the doors we think are closed. Marcus had no reply for that, none that wouldn't give away the truth. Part of him, the aching hidden part, wished she were right, but he stood anyway, thanked her, and walked into the cold December air. The wind cut sharply across his face, carrying with it the faintest echo of her voice. Unexpected doors. He told himself it meant nothing, just a strange encounter on a hard night. Yet as he reached his truck and rested his forehead against the steering wheel, the silver ring on his finger felt heavier than ever, like it was waiting for a decision he wasn't ready to make. Behind him, through the frosted windows of Hearth and Vine, Elena Hart watched him leave with an expression that suggested she wasn't finished believing in unexpected doors. Not yet. Marcus didn't sleep much that night. Sleep came in pieces, thin, fragile sheets that tore every time he shifted. Every time his eyes closed, he saw the woman with the calm voice and the impossible question. By morning, her words were still there, tucked beneath his ribs like something he'd been carrying for far longer than a single evening. He brewed coffee in the dim kitchen, the old machine rattling like it needed encouragement. The smell drifted through the house, warm and bitter, a little like the life he'd settled into. The refrigerator hummed, the heater clicked. Quiet, familiar sounds of a home built on routine, a father's home. He stared at the second mug he'd set out by accident, muscle memory from the years when someone else lived here. A memory of laughter in this kitchen, whispered conversations, a promise to build a life. He pushed the extra mug aside gently, not wanting to hear the small clink it made against the counter. Naomi padded into the room, half asleep, her curls sticking up in a wild halo. Daddy, you're up early. Couldn't sleep, Peanut. She climbed into her usual chair, rubbing her eyes. Do I have pancakes today? School morning, he reminded her softly. Toast it is. Naomi scrunched her nose but accepted it. She always did. She was resilient in ways he wished she didn't have to be. As he sliced strawberries, her small voice floated across the table. Did your date go okay? Marcus paused mid-cut. Naomi didn't pry much, but she always asked gently, always sensing more than he wanted her to. Not really, he said honestly. She wasn't the right person. Naomi nodded, thoughtful. Maybe the right person just didn't see you yet. He blinked. It was strange how children said things without knowing they were speaking truth. He leaned over, kissed the top of her head, then drove her to school, letting her hum Christmas songs the whole way. But Elena Hart followed him like a shadow he could neither outrun nor explain. The way she had looked at him, not with pity, but with recognition, kept replaying in his mind. And that question, if you ever need a husband, he told himself it was absurd. People didn't speak that way. Not in real life. Not with strangers. But the tone she used, steady, almost reverent, made it sound less like a proposal and more like someone whispering a wish into the quiet. He worked through the morning in a blur of electrical panels and breaker boxes. At a client's home, an older man handed him a lemonade and said, "Hot day for December, huh?" Marcus nodded, distracted. His mind wasn't on wires or fuses. It was on a woman with a silver rabbit charm. By lunchtime, he gave up pretending. He walked to a quiet bench outside a hardware store and pulled out the restaurant receipt where the hostess had scribbled his name. On the back, in elegant handwriting, was a phone number. He hadn't noticed it the night before. Elena had written it without telling him. He stared at the digits. A reasonable man would throw it away. A cautious man would ignore it. A father who feared for his daughter's heart would pretend the number didn't exist. But the man sitting on that bench held the receipt like it was a question he'd been avoiding his entire adult life. What if healing didn't come through safety? What if it came through risk? The receipt crinkled as he folded it. He wasn't ready to call. He told himself calling would open a door better left closed, but he also knew something else. Doors didn't close by themselves. People closed them, and sometimes people closed them out of fear. That afternoon, fate intervened. He saw her again. Not at a restaurant, not by chance. She was on a billboard along the highway. Elena Hart, CEO of Heartwave Technologies, smiling confidently beneath the slogan, "Innovation begins with compassion." He almost laughed. Compassion. The woman who proposed marriage to a stranger in a restaurant was the same woman trying to humanize tech. Of course she was. When he arrived home, he found Naomi on the porch, drawing squirrels in the fading light. She looked up. "Daddy, can we feed the ducks this weekend?" "Maybe," he said. "We'll see." "I like feeding the ducks with someone," Naomi said casually. "It's nice to have company." Her innocence hit him like a soft hammer. He went inside before she could see the conflict in his eyes. He placed his tools down, washed his hands, stared at his reflection in the window. A man caught between past and possibility. A man still living with one foot in grief. As he dried his hands, the doorbell rang. He froze. It was too early for Denise to stop by, too late for deliveries. He opened the door slowly, cautiously, and there she was, Elena Hart, wearing simple clothes, shoulders slightly tense, looking nothing like the woman on the billboard. More human, more fragile. She gave a small, uncertain wave. "Hi." Marcus couldn't find words. She glanced past him, noticing the hallway decorated with Naomi's artwork crayon animals, school projects, a paper snowflake taped crookedly above the thermostat. Her eyes softened. "I'm sorry to show up without calling," she said quietly. "I just wanted to apologize if I made things uncomfortable last night." Marcus stepped outside, closing the door behind him so Naomi wouldn't overhear. "You don't need to apologize," he said. "I wasn't offended. Just surprised." She gave a faint laugh. "That makes two of us. I've never said anything like that before." He believed her. Something about her posture, the way she held her hands close to her body, suggested she'd wrestled with whether to come. "Look," she continued, "I didn't mean to disrupt your life. I just saw someone being treated unfairly, and I reacted. Maybe too strongly." "No," Marcus said softly. "You reacted kindly." Her eyes lifted to his. A stillness passed between them, the kind that comes when two people see the truth in each other. "I meant what I said about circumstances," she murmured. "People judge you for being a single father. They judge me for not being able to have children. Both are things we carry without choosing." Marcus swallowed. "I know. And yet," she added, "most people only see the surface." Their gazes held a moment too long. He looked away first. "Why did you come here, Elena?" She hesitated, then answered honestly. "Because something about you stayed with me, and because I think you're a good man trying very hard to stay invisible." He exhaled sharply, not offended, but exposed. "I'm just trying to raise my daughter," he said. Quietly. "Maybe too quietly," she said. "Sometimes justice isn't silence. Sometimes it's allowing yourself to be seen." The words struck something old and bruised inside him. Justice. He had forgotten what that felt like, on an emotional level, not a legal one. Elena stepped back slightly. I won't bother you. I just wanted to make things right. She turned, starting toward her car. He didn't know he was going to speak until the words left his mouth. Elena. She stopped, slowly turned. Yes? Marcus felt his pulse in his throat, felt the ghost of fear gripping his spine. But he also felt Naomi's voice from earlier echoing softly. Maybe the right person just didn't see you yet. He cleared his throat. Maybe we could talk again. Not tonight, but another day. Elena's expression warmed, not triumphant, not expectant, just quietly grateful. I'd like that. She got into her car. The engine hummed. The taillights glowed red against the winter dusk as she drove away. Marcus stood in the cold until she was gone. Then he looked down at the receipt in his hand. The number he thought he'd throw away. He slipped it carefully into his wallet instead. Some doors weren't meant to stay closed. And some questions, however impossible, were meant to be answered slowly, gently, deliberately. He went inside to Naomi, carrying for the first time in years the faint outline of a beginning. Marcus woke before dawn the next morning, long before the first hint of winter light seeped through the blinds. His mind had been restless all night, circling the same thoughts like an old record that refused to switch tracks. Elena's sudden appearance at his doorstep replayed itself over and over, the cautious hope in her eyes, the honesty in her posture, the quiet courage it must have taken for someone in her position to stand on his worn porch steps and apologize for something she hadn't even done wrong. Most people would have forgotten him within an hour of leaving the restaurant. She hadn't, and that unsettled him more than the humiliation from the blind date ever had. Naomi's soft footsteps broke his thoughts. She padded into the kitchen wearing her fuzzy rabbit slippers, the ones she insisted on wearing even when the ears drooped sadly to one side. She climbed into her usual chair. "Daddy," she mumbled, "you're staring at the toaster." Marcus blinked and realized he had indeed been standing 12 inches from the toaster, holding a loaf of bread without actually making breakfast. "Just thinking, Peanut?" "About the lady from the restaurant?" Naomi asked casually, opening her little notebook of animal drawings. The question hit him like a quiet gust. Kids always asked their hardest questions softly, as if kindness could blunt the truth. "Why would you think that?" he asked. Naomi shrugged, sketching quick lines that turned into a squirrel with a crooked tail. "You've been smiling weird." He felt heat rise in his face. "Weird how?" "Weird like when you see a puppy you want a pet but you're not sure if it bites." Marcus nearly dropped the loaf of bread, laughing. Once Naomi was on the school bus, he stood alone on the porch, watching her press her face to the window and wave. The cold air nipped at his skin, but something warm lingered in his chest, the kind of warmth he hadn't carried since before Naomi was born. He locked the door, grabbed his jacket, and drove to see the one person whose voice could cut through the noise in his head, his sister, Denise. Denise lived 10 minutes away in a neighborhood that smelled like coffee, pine needles, and porch conversations, a place where people raked leaves together, watched each other's kids, and talked about weather patterns as if discussing world politics. Her front yard held a nativity set she'd kept for 30 years. The plastic lamb was cracked, but she refused to replace it. History, she always said. Everything cracked has history. Marcus knocked twice and let himself in. Denise stood by the stove, stirring her famous cinnamon oatmeal steam rising like a soft fog. "Morning," she said without turning. "Sit. You look like a man whose thoughts kept him up." Marcus sat heavily. "How'd you know?" "Because you're here before 8, she replied. "You only do that when your heart is chewing on something." He hesitated. "I met someone." "Well, not met. More like collided." Denise finally turned, her eyebrows rising. "Collided?" He exhaled. "She talked to me at the restaurant last night, after the date went bad." "Which date?" "The one you set up." Denise clicked her tongue. "Lord help me, I try." He explained everything. What the woman had said, how she'd shown up at the house, how something about her felt like a question he wasn't ready to answer. He left nothing out, not even the strange calm in her voice when she said she recognized his loneliness like it was something she carried too. By the time he finished, Denise had sat across from him, her expression unreadable. "Okay," she said. "So this Elena woman, she's rich, smart, and clearly interested in you. And you're here, looking like someone stole your favorite wrench, because of that." "It's complicated," he muttered. "Everything worth having is complicated." He rubbed his palms together. "She said she wants a family. Like, a real one. And that scares you?" "Yes," he whispered. "More than I expected." Denise leaned back, folding her arms. "Marcus, listen carefully. Fear can pretend it's loyalty. Don't confuse the two." He stared at her. She continued, "You think holding on to the past honors your wife, but holding on isn't loyalty if it keeps you and Naomi from living. Your wife wouldn't want you to stay lonely." Marcus swallowed hard. The words struck deep, steady, and precise like a chisel revealing grain beneath old wood. "I'm not trying to replace her," he said quietly. "Of course not," Denise replied. "But don't use grief as a wall. Naomi is growing. Her world is expanding. She deserves to see you expand too." He exhaled shakily. "Naomi likes Elena. She hasn't even talked to her, but she senses something." Denise smiled knowingly. "Children recognize gentle souls, faster than adults do." Marcus stared out the kitchen window, watching a neighbor move holiday decorations around. A breeze rattled the old wind chimes hanging from the porch bells that had belonged to his mother. He remembered being a boy, hearing those same bells on nights when the world felt too big. Denise touched his arm. "Marcus, the question isn't whether Elena scares you. The question is, does she make you hope again?" He flinched at the word. Hope. Hope was dangerous. Hope could shatter. Hope required believing the world could be kind. But he didn't lie. "Yes," he whispered, "she does." Denise smiled, slow and proud. "Then call her." He shook his head. "I can't just call her out of nowhere." "Why not?" "Because I don't know what to say." "Say the truth," Denise said. "Truth is always the beginning, not the end." She stood, refilled his coffee, then added softly, "Remember this, justice doesn't always look like victory. Sometimes it looks like giving your heart permission to live again." Marcus felt something shift inside him, subtle but undeniable. A loosening, a thaw. He left Denise's house with her words echoing behind him, louder than the wind chimes. On the drive home, he reached into his wallet at a red light and unfolded the receipt with Elena's number. He traced the ink with his thumb. Someone behind him honked when the light changed, but he didn't move right away. Not because he was frozen, but because he was thinking. For the first time in years, he wasn't afraid of the road ahead. He drove home slowly, letting the city pass by, a swirl of red holiday bows, early shoppers, people carrying wreaths on car roofs. Atlanta felt different today. Not warmer, not kinder, but less heavy. As he pulled into the driveway, Naomi's drawings taped to the window seemed brighter, as if they too were waiting for something. Maybe someone. He stepped out of the truck and held the receipt in his hand, letting the winter sun warm the paper. He didn't call Elena. Not yet. But he didn't put the receipt away either. He kept it in his hand as he opened the front door, feeling its presence like a heartbeat synced with his own. Some beginnings weren't loud. Some arrived quietly like footsteps on a porch, or a soft question asked by a stranger who somehow saw the good in you before you remembered it yourself. Saturday arrived with the soft kind of winter sunlight that made Atlanta look gentler than it actually was. The sidewalks were still damp from overnight rain, the grass at Piedmont Park carrying a thin shimmer that caught the light like scattered glass. Marcus parked by the east entrance, letting the engine idle a moment longer than necessary. His hands rested on the steering wheel, steady but not calm. On the passenger seat lay a small bag of crumbled bread, the kind Naomi loved to bring for the ducks. Beside it, her sketchbook peeked out, a corner of a rabbit drawing visible. Naomi bounced in the back seat, kicking her heels lightly against the cushion. "Daddy, what time is she coming?" Marcus glanced at the dashboard clock. "Soon. Is she nice?" "Yes," he answered before thinking, then added carefully, "I think she's kind. That matters more than nice." Naomi seemed satisfied with that. She grabbed her mittens, one pink, one purple. The mismatched pair, she insisted, had different personalities. Children never feared differences. Adults did. Marcus stepped out and opened the back door. Naomi hopped down, her breath forming little clouds. She grabbed his hand, swinging it gently as they walked toward the pond. Families dotted the park, older couples strolling arm in arm, joggers wearing Santa hats, a few retirees taking photographs of geese with cameras they'd owned longer than Marcus had owned a car. The air carried the faint scent of roasted nuts from a nearby vendor cart, blending with cold earth and wet leaves. He spotted her before Naomi did. Elena stood near the water, holding a small paper bag close to her chest. She wore a simple cream sweater, jeans, and a wool coat that reached her calves. Her hair was tied back loosely, a few strands blowing across her cheek. She didn't look like a CEO. She looked like someone arriving at the beginning of something she desperately hoped wouldn't vanish. And when she saw them, her entire face shifted, brightened in a way that wasn't grand or dramatic, but warm, like someone recognizing a missing piece. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi," Marcus replied. Naomi tightened her grip on his hand, studying Elena with unabashed curiosity. Elena knelt immediately, lowering herself to eye level, not with overacting sweetness, but with genuine respect, like she understood what it meant for a child to feel seen. "You must be Naomi," she said gently. "Your dad told me you like animals." Naomi nodded. "I draw them." Elena's smile broadened. "I love animals too. I brought something. Can I show you?" From the paper bag, she pulled out a handful of tiny, round seeds. "These are better for ducks than bread. Healthier. But bread works too." Naomi's eyes widened. "You know about ducks?" "A little," Elena admitted. "Mostly because I volunteer at an animal rescue on weekends. They taught me things." Naomi glanced up at Marcus for permission. He nodded. She took a few seeds, walked to the pond's edge, and tossed them gently. Ducks fluttered over, quacking in eager disarray. Naomi giggled, the sound bright and full. Marcus hadn't heard that sound in weeks, not like this, unburdened and free. Elena rose slowly, dusting her hands. "She's wonderful," she whispered. "She is," Marcus said quietly. "She likes you." Elena's eyes softened. "I hope so. It's not always easy for her," Marcus added. "Or for me." Elena turned to him fully now, her gaze steady. "I don't want to step where I'm not welcome. That's why I came gently." "I know," Marcus said, "and I appreciate that." They walked toward a bench while Naomi continued feeding the ducks. The park's morning hum wrapped around them, children laughing, the distant bark of a small dog, wind chimes from a vendor's stall tinkling like soft bells. A comfort older listeners would recognize, the gentle soundtrack of ordinary life. "I didn't expect you to come," Marcus said, his voice low. "Part of me didn't expect you to ask," Elena replied. "But part of me hoped you would." "Why?" Elena hesitated, then spoke with the honesty that defined her. "Because when I saw you yesterday, at your house, you looked like someone who'd forgotten you deserved connection. And I know that feeling too well." Marcus swallowed. He didn't trust his voice enough to respond. Instead, he watched Naomi stoop to pick up a white feather floating near the shore. She examined it with the seriousness of a small scientist. Elena watched her, admiration softening her entire posture. "She reminds me of myself," Elena murmured. "When I was her age, everything tiny in the world mattered. Feathers, ladybugs, stray cats. My mother used to joke I'd grow up to run a farm or a zoo." She paused, her tone tightening. "I didn't grow up to be a mother, though." Marcus turned to her. "Not being able to doesn't make you less one." Elena met his eyes, startled by the gentleness in his voice. Before she could answer, Naomi ran up, holding out the feather. "This is for you," she announced to Elena. "It's pretty," Elena said, accepting it like a fragile gift. "Why give it to me?" Naomi shrugged. "You look like someone who would keep pretty things safe." Marcus felt something twist inside him, an ache so tender and sudden he almost stepped back. Elena blinked rapidly. Overcome, she crouched again. "Thank you, sweetheart. I'll take good care of it." Naomi leaned closer, whispering loudly, "You can hold my notebook too, if you want." She extended the sketchbook filled with rabbits, cats, squirrels, her world of small, earnest creatures. Elena held it with reverence, flipping through pages as if handling a priceless portfolio. "These are beautiful," she breathed. "You're very talented." Naomi beamed. "Daddy says drawings make the world softer." "Your dad is right," Elena said, glancing at Marcus with something warm and weighted. They spent the next hour walking through the park. Naomi teaching Elena which squirrels were regulars, Elena teaching Naomi how to tell duck species apart. Marcus walked a step behind them, watching a connection form with such natural ease it unsettled him. Hope and fear braided together inside him, fear of Naomi being hurt, fear of hurting Elena, fear of letting go of grief, but also hope, quiet, persistent hope. When they reached the playground, Naomi asked, "Miss Elena, can you push me on the swing?" Elena looked to Marcus for permission. He nodded. She stepped behind Naomi, giving her a gentle push, careful and steady. Naomi squealed with delight. "Higher!" Elena laughed, her voice ringing clear across the cold air. Marcus watched from the bench, hands clasped loosely in front of him, a man beside him. A retiree feeding birds glanced over. "Your lady's good with kids. She's—" "Not my lady," Marcus said automatically. The man smirked. "If you say so, son." Something about the stranger's tone wry, knowing stuck with Marcus, maybe because it felt like the world itself nudging him forward. When Elena eventually walked back to him, cheeks flushed from the cold, she said quietly, "Thank you for letting me meet her." "Thank you for coming," Marcus replied. Naomi ran up, grabbing Elena's hand. "Can we do this again?" she asked breathlessly. Elena looked at Marcus, asking without words. Marcus felt the tightness in his chest loosen, not vanish, but shift. "Yes," he said softly. "We can." Naomi cheered. Elena's smile deepened, not triumphant but grounded, as if she understood the weight of what he had just allowed. As they walked back to the truck, Naomi holding both their hands, Marcus felt the world tilt just slightly, but unmistakably towards something new. Not safe, not certain, but real. And beginnings, he realized, were rarely anything else. By the time Sunday morning light filled the kitchen, the memory of yesterday at Piedmont Park lingered in Marcus's mind like a warmth he didn't quite know how to name. It wasn't dramatic, not the kind of life-changing revelation movies bragged about, but something quieter, more dangerous. Possibility. Real possibility. He tried to ignore it as he flipped pancakes for Naomi, her weekend ritual. But the sound of her humming a tune she'd learned from Elena made the truth undeniable. Even the way Naomi drew her rabbits that morning seemed different, softer lines, happier strokes, as if her small world had expanded overnight. "Daddy," she said suddenly, waving her fork. "Miss Elena knows a lot about animals. She told me ducks can sleep with one eye open." He smiled. "You told me that years ago." "Yeah, but when she said it, it sounded more real." He felt a tug in his chest at that. Naomi wasn't attaching to Elena because she needed a mother figure urgently. She was attaching because, for the first time in a long time, someone felt naturally connected to her. That was a kind of vulnerability he hadn't prepared for. After breakfast, Marcus drove Naomi to her art club at the community center. The building was busy, retirees setting up crochet tables, volunteers arranging coffee urns, the kind of place older Americans clung to because it kept neighborhoods alive. A familiar scene, soaked in the kind of community warmth Marcus had grown up with. As Naomi ran into the classroom, a woman who worked there, Miss Carroll, a widow in her 60s, leaned toward Marcus. "Your girl's glowing today," she said, stirring her coffee. "Did something special happen?" Marcus hesitated. "She met someone." Miss Carroll raised a brow. "Someone good?" "I think so." "Then don't overthink it," she advised. "Children know when someone means well. They're better judges of character than we are." Her words echoed Denise's, and that repetition gnawed at him all afternoon. After dropping Naomi off, Marcus drove to a job site. The Wilson family's old house had flickering lights, faulty wiring, nothing complicated, just tedious work. Normally he found comfort in the monotony, but today, every socket reminded him of something Elena had said. "Maybe you're a good man trying too hard to stay invisible." That line clung to him like static. When he finished, Mr. Wilson, an older man with a veteran's posture, asked, "You all right, son? You seem wired." Marcus chuckled weakly. "Just got a lot on my mind." "Women trouble?" the man asked knowingly. "Something like that." "Well, Mr. Wilson said, patting his shoulder, "life's short. And sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is let himself be happy." Marcus left the house feeling the universe had conspired to put the same message in every mouth that day. He checked his phone out of habit. A message from Elena blinked on the screen. "Thank you again for yesterday. Naomi is a remarkable girl. You're doing a good job, Marcus." He reread the message twice, then a third time, the simple sincerity threading straight into him. He typed "thank you" 3 separate times and deleted it each time, annoyed that gratitude felt so small compared to what she'd done for Naomi. Finally, he stopped typing altogether and slipped the phone into his pocket. Later that afternoon, he and Naomi went to the local diner, a small place with vinyl booths, older couples reading newspapers, and Charlie, a retired mechanic who knew every regular by name. It was the kind of place where the coffee was always slightly burnt, but the conversation was warm enough to make up for it. Naomi colored on her placemat while Marcus ate in silence. That silence didn't last long. Charlie leaned on the counter and yelled across the diner, "Marcus, heard you were out with a lady yesterday." Heads turned. Conversations paused. Older folks grinned like they'd been waiting for gossip. Marcus groaned internally. "It's not like that," he said quickly. "It's complicated. Everything's complicated," Charlie said. "But if she makes you smile, that's step 1. A few people nodded in approval, an informal jury of elders weighing in. It was harmless talk, but Marcus could feel their expectations, the collective longing of people rooting for him simply because they'd watched him fight through years of widowhood and fatigue. Their hope became a burden he hadn't agreed to carry. Later that evening, as he tucked Naomi into bed, she whispered, "Daddy, can we see Miss Elena again next weekend?" Her voice was soft, fragile, like she was bracing for disappointment. Marcus smoothed her curls. "We'll see, Peanut. Do you like her?" The question froze him. He sat there for a long moment before answering, "I think I'm learning to." Naomi smiled sleepily. "She makes the world softer. Like my drawings." After she drifted to sleep, Marcus sat in the dim hallway outside her room. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that always reminded him of what he'd lost. He rubbed his wedding ring, the metal warm from his skin. Denise's words echoed again. Fear can pretend it's loyalty. He didn't know if he was being loyal or afraid. Maybe both. He didn't know if letting Elena into their lives was a blessing or a risk. Maybe both. What he did know was that Naomi's joy today had been real, unforced, uncoached, a joy he hadn't created but hoped to protect. And that realization alone was enough to shift something deep inside him. He walked to the living room, the phone heavy in his hand. He stared at Elena's text again. This time, he didn't overthink. He typed slowly, deliberately. "Naomi would like to see you again. If you're free next Saturday, we could meet at the park." His thumb hovered over send. He hesitated only once, the way someone might pause before stepping onto a bridge. Then he pressed it. The message whooshed away. A beginning, once again, moving forward whether he felt ready or not. Marcus sat back on the couch, exhaling into the silence. Something fragile had begun, and he knew enough about fragile things to understand they required gentleness, patience, and honesty. He didn't know where this road led toward love, heartbreak, or something in between, but for the first time in years, he wasn't walking it alone. In the room down the hall, Naomi slept holding the white duck feather she'd given Elena, a small symbol of trust, a small beginning for a family that didn't yet have a name. Elena arrived at her office Monday morning long before anyone else, the way she often did when something in her heart felt unsettled. Heartwave Technologies occupied the top 4 floors of a gleaming tower downtown, all glass and steel, a fortress of ambition she had built brick by invisible brick. She unlocked the door to her private floor, the lights flickering on automatically, brightening the polished concrete hallways and minimalist decor. The quiet was soothing, but not enough to drown the memory of Marcus's text from the night before. "Naomi would like to see you again. If you're free next Saturday, we could meet at the park." She'd stared at that message for a long time before replying, long enough to feel her heartbeat in her wrists. It wasn't the invitation that frightened her. It was how her chest had warmed when she read it, as if some long closed door inside her had swung open with a sigh. And the truth was simple. Naomi had reached her in a way no child ever had, maybe in a way no person ever had. Elena set her bag down and crossed the room to the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the early traffic crawl along the freeway below. The city felt busy, indifferent, and full of noise, so much noise that vulnerable things often got swallowed whole. She knew the feeling well. She had built her company from nothing, fought for credibility in rooms full of men who saw her as a novelty until she proved herself a threat. She had learned to walk, talk, and command, like a woman who needed nothing from anyone. But when Naomi had placed that delicate little feather in her palm, Elena had felt seen in a way that had nothing to do with power, a way that terrified her. Her office door opened with a soft click. It was Claire, her chief operating officer, a sharp woman in her 50s who'd been by Elena's side since the days of renting office space above a laundromat. "You're early," Claire said, slipping into the room with 2 cups of coffee. "Couldn't sleep," Elena replied, accepting the cup. "New product launch nerves?" Claire teased. "Or is this about the man you accidentally proposed to in a restaurant?" Elena sputtered into her coffee. "Claire!" "What?" Claire smirked. "Half the staff saw you leave with your sleeves rolled up and a dreamy look on your face. I put the pieces together." Elena groaned, leaning against the desk. "I did not propose to him." "Honey, you literally told him you were looking for a husband." I panicked. "About what?" Elena hesitated, searching for words. Claire had known every version of her determined Elena, heartbroken Elena, Elena who hid her infertility diagnosis like a guilty secret, but she didn't know this Elena yet. "He was being humiliated," Elena said quietly. "It triggered something in me. I reacted." Claire softened. "And this man Marcus, right? What is he like?" Elena exhaled slowly. "He's good, gentle. He loves his daughter more than anything, and she's extraordinary, Claire. Smart, creative, curious. She sees the world the way I used to when I was a kid." Claire watched her with an expression Elena couldn't read. "You're getting attached." "I'm not," Elena lied quickly. "I just admire them." "And does he admire you?" Elena folded her arms. "He barely knows me, but he still invited you again." Elena's pulse jumped. She looked back toward the window, unable to hide the small smile pulling at her lips. "He did." "So what's the problem?" Claire asked gently. Elena didn't answer right away. She took a slow sip of coffee, choosing her words carefully. "I know what people say when a woman in my position dates a man who isn't wealthy, especially a black single father. They'll call it charity, a project, a publicity stunt." Claire nodded, her expression tight with empathy. "People love to judge things they don't understand." "I don't care what they say about me," Elena continued. But I care about what Naomi hears, what Marcus hears. They've already lived enough judgment. Claire stepped closer, placing a hand on Elena's shoulder. Then you protect them. That's all you can do. Elena swallowed the knot in her throat. Protecting vulnerable things, yes, that she could do. She had spent years protecting her younger self, the one who used to bring home stray animals, the one who cried when people fought, the one who dreamed of a big family with too many pets and a garden full of messy vegetables. That little girl was still inside her somewhere, even if the world had forced her to wear armor. A knock interrupted them. It was Ethan from the executive team, early 30s, ambitious in a way that lacked grace. "Morning," he said, giving Elena a thin smile. "Heard you were seen at Piedmont Park yesterday. Doing community outreach?" Elena stiffened. "No," she replied. "I wasn't working." "Ah," he said, eyebrows raised. "Just socializing then? With a client?" Claire's eyes flashed. She said she wasn't working. Ethan lifted his hands in surrender, but the smirk remained. "Of course. Just making conversation." After he left, Claire muttered, "I'd like to have a conversation with him outside, where HR can't hear." Elena rubbed her temples. "This is exactly what I meant. Ignore him. I can't ignore all of them." "Elena," Claire said firmly, "you built this company. No one gets to define your personal life but you." Elena didn't respond. She returned to her desk and opened her laptop, but the spreadsheet in front of her blurred. All she could see was Naomi's smile, Naomi's trust, and Marcus, watching them with a tenderness he didn't try to hide. She wondered if he knew how rare that tenderness was in the world she lived in. By midday, she found herself holding the feather Naomi had given her, running her thumb gently across its soft edge. How could such a small thing feel so monumental? Because it wasn't just a feather. It was an offering, a symbol of belonging from a child who had lost too much too young, a child who deserved a soft world. Elena tucked the feather into her notebook as if protecting something sacred. Later that afternoon, she slipped out onto the company balcony for air. The wind brushed her cheeks, sharper now. Below, the city pulsed with life sirens, horns, laughter, street vendors shouting holiday deals. A man selling roasted chestnuts waved from the corner. A group of retirees fed pigeons by the bus stop. Little scenes of everyday humanity, the kind she clung to more than anyone realized. Her phone buzzed. A new text, from Marcus. She inhaled sharply before opening it. "Glad you're free next weekend." Naomi's excited. "I am too," in a careful way. Elena read it 3 times, her heart tightening on the last line. In a careful way. Yes, that was how he moved, carefully, gently, like someone carrying both grief and hope in the same set of hands. She typed back, fingers trembling slightly. "I'm looking forward to it. Tell Naomi I'll bring something special for the ducks." She hit send. There, on the balcony overlooking the city she had fought so hard to conquer, Elena Hart felt the quiet beginning of something she could not yet name, something she feared and wanted in equal measure. Not love, not yet. But the early breath of it, the early warmth of it, and for the first time in years, she let herself imagine what a family might look like if the universe dared to give her one. By Friday evening, the week had stretched Marcus thin, not in the physical sense. He'd handled tougher work weeks without blinking, but in the quiet way a man becomes tired when too many thoughts pull at him in opposite directions. Every night after work, he replayed the same questions. Was he letting Naomi get attached too quickly? Was he leading Elena into something he wasn't ready for? Was he betraying a memory he still hadn't fully laid to rest? But the hardest question, the one he couldn't speak aloud, was this. Was he afraid of loving someone again, or afraid they might actually love him back? The mind of a single father could twist anything into a burden. The heart of a widower could turn any beginning into a battlefield. And under all that, he felt something else, something he didn't want to name yet. Longing. Saturday approached faster than he expected. Naomi woke early, bounding into his room with excitement humming through her entire body. "Daddy, it's today," she squealed. "Can we go early? Like super early? Can we?" Marcus blinked awake, rubbing his face with both hands. "Let's start with breakfast first, but Miss Elena might be early too." "Peanut, no one goes to the park at 7 in the morning except squirrels." Naomi giggled but kept bouncing. "Then we can go when the squirrels wake up." He couldn't help but laugh. Her joy was contagious and dangerous. After breakfast, he found himself ironing the only decent button-up shirt he owned that wasn't work-stained. He told himself it didn't matter, that it wasn't a date, that he was doing it for Naomi's sake. But his reflection didn't buy the excuses, he whispered to himself. He got Naomi ready coat zipped up to her chin, scarf tied carefully, gloves on the correct hands this time, and they drove to Piedmont Park. The sky was pale blue, thin clouds drifting like soft brushstrokes. The air was crisp enough to make their breath visible. Elena arrived a few minutes after they did, walking toward them with a small canvas tote bag and that familiar, careful smile, the one that always seemed to carry gratitude for being allowed into their orbit. Naomi ran straight to her. "Miss Elena, did you bring the special thing?" Elena knelt, lifting the tote. "I did." She pulled out small paper cups filled with mixed grains, tiny shrimp pellets, and cracked corn foods healthier for ducks than bread. "This is the rescue center's best blend," she said proudly. Naomi gasped. "They're gonna love it." Watching them together, Marcus felt a tension coil inside him. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't fear of losing his place. It was something deeper, an emotion he hadn't prepared for. The realization that Naomi's affection for Elena was growing fast, faster than his own ability to understand what he felt. They walked toward the pond, Elena holding the tote, Naomi skipping beside her, and Marcus following one step behind. They looked like a family from a distance, a thought that struck him with both warmth and unease. Naomi fed the ducks with delighted squeals. Elena laughed, tossing grains gently across the water. Marcus stood with his hands in his pockets, watching them, listening to the strange harmony forming between their voices. A few joggers passed by. One of them slowed near Marcus, giving him a good-natured nod. "Your wife and daughter are adorable," he said before jogging off. Marcus stiffened. He didn't correct the man, not because he agreed, but because the words slid under his defenses and rested somewhere tender. When he turned back, he saw Elena looking at him with a question in her eyes. Not judgment, not expectation, just curiosity, and maybe a hint of concern. "You okay?" she asked gently. "Yeah," he said. "Too fast." She didn't push. Instead, she stepped closer, as if sensing the shift in him. "You've been quiet today, just thinking." "About?" He hesitated. "About a lot." She nodded, understanding more than he said. "If it's about Naomi, I don't want to move too fast. I don't want to take a place that isn't mine." Marcus exhaled slowly. "I know that, but she's getting attached." "Yes," Elena whispered. "I can feel it." He lifted his gaze to hers. "And that scares me." Her face softened, not with pity, but with empathy. "It scares me too." She paused, choosing her next words with care. "I don't want to be a wound in her life. Only a gentle part of it, if that's something you ever want." He swallowed hard. Her sincerity disarmed him completely. And maybe that was what frightened him. The kindness in her voice, the steadiness in her posture, the way she held space for his fears instead of trying to erase them. He looked away, watching Naomi chase a particularly bold duck. "I'm trying," he said quietly. "I know," Elena murmured, "and trying is enough." But trying didn't erase the knot of guilt that tugged at him every time he remembered his wife's face, her laugh, her hands, the promise he'd made at her bedside. He hadn't expected the heart to hold grief and curiosity at the same time. The collision of the two felt almost disloyal, and yet, when Naomi ran back to them, breathless and glowing, shouting, "Miss Elena, look, a tiny duckling," he saw Elena's entire expression light up with a joy so pure it stunned him. She knelt immediately, inspecting the duckling with Naomi as if the tiny creature were a treasure. They spoke in hushed tones, sharing knowledge, sharing wonder, sharing a connection he couldn't control, a connection he didn't know how to protect, or limit, or understand. That was the moment the fear hit him hardest, not fear of Elena, but fear of himself, fear that he could grow to want her, fear that he already did, fear that opening this door even a little might open wounds that hadn't fully healed. And deeper than all of that, fear of losing her once Naomi loved her too deeply. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the cold air sting his face. When he opened them, Elena was watching him again, not with confusion, but recognition. She spoke softly, so Naomi couldn't hear. "Marcus, hope is not betrayal." The words hit him like a quiet truth he'd been avoiding. He didn't answer. Couldn't. Instead, he looked at Naomi and forced a smile. When the sun began to lower, casting gold across the water, he told Naomi it was time to go. As they walked back to the truck, Naomi insisted on holding Elena's hand the whole way. Marcus watched them, heart pounding with something he couldn't yet name, something between longing and terror. At the truck, Naomi hugged Elena tightly. "Will you come again?" she asked. Elena looked at Marcus. He gave a small nod, though his chest felt tight enough to crack. "Yes, sweetheart," Elena said. "I'll come again." Naomi climbed into the truck, humming. Elena stepped back, but she didn't turn away immediately. Marcus met her gaze. There was no pressure in her eyes, no demand, just a kind of waiting, gentle, patient, and quietly brave. "Thank you for today," she whispered. "For trusting me." Marcus nodded slowly. "I'm trying," he repeated. She smiled. "Try as long as you need." And then, with a softness that made his heart twist, she added, "I'm not going anywhere." She walked to her car. Marcus watched her leave, his breath uneven, his pulse loud. Hope was not betrayal, but hope, he realized, was a storm, and he was standing in the middle of it. The winter sun hung low over the neighborhood as Marcus pulled into the school parking lot, the kind of late afternoon glow that made everything look softer than real life. Naomi had been buzzing all week about her art display, her first official exhibition at school, where parents and teachers wandered through rows of decorated easels, pretending they were at a gallery downtown instead of a repurposed gymnasium with scuffed floors and squeaky bleachers. Marcus told himself he was there only to support his daughter, to clap, to smile, to be proud, nothing more. But part of him also knew Elena would be there. He had texted her the date casually, cautiously expecting she might decline, claim a work conflict, or simply sense his unease. Instead, she'd replied within minutes, "I wouldn't miss it for anything. Tell Naomi I can't wait to see her masterpiece." Masterpiece. Naomi had repeated the word all week, rolling it around like a marble she didn't want to lose. Inside the gym, holiday lights had been draped along the walls, flickering softly. Tables were lined with handmade crafts, snowmen made of socks, cotton ball reindeer, paper wreaths that looked more like tangled green suns. Parents chatted, some taking photos, some balancing toddlers on their hips. It was a scene full of modest pride and community warmth, the kind older Americans understood deeply because they remembered similar events from their own childhoods. Naomi spotted her canvas near the center. She grabbed Marcus's hand and tugged. "Daddy, there it is." He followed her, smiling down at the sight of her bouncing curls. But when he reached the easel and saw the painting, his breath caught. At first glance, it was a Christmas scene, a tree glowing in watercolor lights, presents beneath it, but the figures beside the tree stunned him. 3 people, 3 figures holding hands, a tall man with warm brown skin, a woman with dark hair tucked behind her ear, and a little girl in a bright red sweater. Above them, Naomi had written in careful, uneven letters, "My new family." Marcus's chest tightened. Naomi looked up at him proudly. "Do you like it?" His mouth opened, but no words came out, not at first. "Naomi," he whispered, I wanted you to know," she said simply. This is what I hope for." He felt his heartbeat shift, as if the world had tilted beneath him. Before he could steady himself, he sensed someone approaching. Elena. She moved quietly through the crowd, clutching a small gift bag, her eyes scanning the displays until they landed on them. On him, on Naomi. When she reached them, Naomi rushed into her. "Miss Elena, come see what I painted." Elena knelt beside her eagerly. "I can't wait." Naomi stepped aside proudly. Elena looked at the painting and froze. Her breath hitched inaudibly, but Marcus saw it in the soft widening of her eyes, the trembling stillness in her hands. She traced the air near the canvas, as though afraid to touch something sacred. "Naomi," she whispered. "This is beautiful." Naomi beamed. "It's us." Elena swallowed. "Yes," she breathed. "It is." Marcus could not read the full expression on her face: joy, awe, fear, hope, all tangled together. It was the expression of someone seeing a door open she hadn't dared assume existed. And for a moment, even through the swirl of conversation, the hum of holiday lights, the shuffle of parents, something quiet settled around the three of them. Something that felt like destiny pressed gently against their shoulders. Naomi tugged Elena's sleeve. "Did I paint your hair right?" Elena smiled through the sudden gloss in her eyes. "You painted it perfectly." Naomi turned to Marcus. "Daddy, can she hang the painting in her house, please?" Marcus's throat tightened. He tried to speak but found himself stuck between caution and longing, between fear and the undeniable truth that his daughter saw something he was too afraid to name. Elena placed a gentle hand on Naomi's back. "Sweetheart, maybe your dad can keep it for now. This is very special." Naomi blinked. "But you're part of it too." Marcus finally spoke, voice rough. "We'll find a place for it where we can all see it." Elena looked up at him then. Really looked. Her expression softened, warmed, deepened like something inside her had just stepped forward. She stood slowly, smoothing her coat. "Marcus," she said quietly, "may I talk to you for a moment?" He nodded, bracing for something he wasn't sure he could handle. She guided them a few steps away from the crowd. Naomi stayed by the canvas, humming to herself. The moment Naomi was out of earshot, Elena exhaled. "I didn't expect," she gestured faintly toward the painting. "I didn't expect anything like this." "Neither did I," Marcus said. "She adores you." "I adore her too," Elena whispered. "More than I should already." His pulse quickened. "Elena, I know," she said gently. "I know this is happening fast. I know it scares you. It scares me too." She stepped closer, not invading, just bridging the smallest distance. "But Marcus, I didn't do anything to earn that child's love. She saw me. She welcomed me." "That means something." "It does," he admitted. "But that's what frightens me. If she loses you—" "She won't," Elena said softly. "Not unless you push me away." The words struck him like a quiet blow. Honest, direct, true. He didn't respond. He couldn't, not yet. His emotions were too tangled. His wife's memory weighed on him like a shadow. Naomi's hope tugged at him like sunlight trying to pull through the clouds. And then, as if the universe sensed the tension building between them, Naomi ran back into their circle. "Miss Elena! Miss Elena! They're giving out cookies shaped like snowflakes. Come on!" Elena smiled softly, grateful for the interruption. She took Naomi's hand with delicate care, as if holding something precious. She turned back to Marcus briefly. Just one look that said she wasn't running away from this. From them, from what was growing. When Naomi dragged her toward the refreshment table, Marcus stood still, breathing hard, the painting glowing behind him like a prophecy. My new family. For a moment the gym felt warmer, brighter, like hope had taken a physical seat in the room. But behind the warmth was something else. A tension he couldn't quite dismiss. The sense that beginnings this beautiful were fragile. And sometimes, life tested fragile things just to see if they could hold. He stared at the painting again. 3 figures holding hands beneath a Christmas tree. A future Naomi already believed in. A future Elena was willing to walk toward. and a future he wasn't sure he had the courage to claim. Not yet, but as he watched Naomi laughing beside Elena, the realization came quietly, like a truth he'd been resisting too long. He wanted that future, even if wanting it hurt, even if wanting it meant facing everything he feared. He wanted it enough to almost forget why he should be afraid in the first place. Almost. The days after the art show passed with a gentleness Marcus didn't entirely trust. Something inside him tightened each time he remembered Naomi's painting, My New Family, but another part of him warmed at the thought. Sometimes he caught himself smiling at nothing, then immediately straightening, as if joy itself were a dangerous indulgence. Elena texted occasionally, small notes, nothing heavy. Hope you and Naomi had a good day. Tell her I saw a rabbit in my yard this morning. Would she like to help me bake gingerbread next weekend? Marcus answered each message carefully, aware that every exchange pulled him one step further toward a future he hadn't yet decided to claim. But Naomi didn't hesitate. She talked about Elena constantly. How gently she held animals, how carefully she listened, how warm her smile felt. For a child who hadn't had a woman's presence in her daily life for years, Elena had filled a gap Naomi didn't even know how to describe. And that made Saturday's invitation both a blessing and a risk. The community center was hosting a winter festival, a mix of music, food stalls, handmade crafts, and the sort of small-town charm older Americans cherished. Marcus brought Naomi to sing with her classmates, expecting an ordinary afternoon. He didn't expect Elena to show up holding 2 thermoses of hot cocoa, one for Naomi with extra marshmallows, and one for him with cinnamon and nutmeg. I remembered you liked nutmeg, she said shyly. He hadn't remembered telling her that. He felt something shift inside him, slow and seismic. Naomi ran off to rehearse, leaving him and Elena standing together under the white string lights. Families passed by, smiling politely. A few looked at them with warmth, an approving kind of curiosity. But others paused just a second too long. Marcus felt it instantly. The subtle social weight, the subtle tension he'd learned to recognize since childhood. A black man, a wealthy Latina CEO, a child who looked like him reaching easily for the hand of a woman who looked like her. Most people were kind, but some weren't, and it took only one to shatter the fragile peace he'd built. It happened fast, too fast. Naomi had just finished singing when someone called his name, a voice he recognized before he even turned. Marcus? It was Evelyn, his late wife's aunt. She had raised his wife after her parents died, a stern woman with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. She hadn't spoken to Marcus much since the funeral. He felt his throat tighten. Evelyn. I didn't know you were here. She stepped closer, her gaze landing on Elena, first assessing, measuring, disapproving. Then on Naomi, who clung instinctively to Marcus's leg. So this is what's become of you, Evelyn said, loud enough for nearby families to hear. My niece hasn't even been gone 10 years, and you're out here replacing her with, she gestured vaguely, as though Elena were a concept rather than a person. Elena stiffened. Not from offense, she knew how to endure boardroom cruelty, but from the way Naomi's eyes grew wide with confusion. Evelyn, Marcus said slowly, this is not the time. Not the time? Evelyn snapped. Then when, Marcus, when do I get to ask why you're parading another woman around like she's Naomi's mother? Does your conscience not ache at all? The crowd had quieted. Conversations paused. The musicians lowered their instruments. Marcus felt hundreds of eyes land on him, judging, whispering, deciding who he was. Elena swallowed hard, instinctively taking Naomi's hand as a protective gesture, but Naomi pulled back, startled by the tension. I'm not replacing anyone, Elena said softly, her voice calm, respectful. Evelyn turned on her. And you, she hissed, you have no right. Marcus stepped forward. Enough. Enough. Evelyn scoffed. You should be ashamed. My niece worshipped you. And now you bring this stranger into the child's life like a new ornament for Christmas. Elena lowered her eyes, but not in submission, in pain. And Naomi, trembling, whispered, "Daddy, what's happening?" Marcus's chest clenched. He bent toward Naomi, but his voice wouldn't come out fast enough. Evelyn continued, unstoppable. "You think people don't talk? They say you're chasing money now, that you found yourself a woman to buy you a new life." The humiliation came like a blow to the gut. Marcus felt heat rise behind his eyes, anger, shame, grief, fear, all tightening at once. This wasn't about class, or money, or race. It was about memory, his wife's, and how Evelyn wielded it like a weapon. The crowd watched, expecting a scene, expecting him to defend Elena, expecting him to choose. And that pressure ignited something Marcus didn't know how to control. He panicked. Fear took the shape of instinct. Instinct took the shape of denial. "She's not Naomi's mother," Marcus said sharply. It was the tone that did the damage, not the words. Words could be explained, softened later. But tone revealed fear, revealed rejection, revealed distance. He saw Elena's shoulders lift slightly as if absorbing an unseen impact. Naomi stared at him, confused. Evelyn smirked, satisfied. "I knew it," she said. "Just a phase, just a foolish distraction." Elena looked at Marcus one deep, searching look, waiting for him to correct himself, to defend her, to stand beside her. But he couldn't, not in front of Evelyn, not with old grief clawing at him, not with the judgment of an entire community pressing down on his spine. He stood silent. And that silence sliced through Elena, sharper than anything Evelyn had said. Her face didn't crumble. Elena was too composed for that, but her eyes darkened with a hurt she couldn't hide. She released a trembling breath and stepped back. "I should go," she whispered. She turned, walking away before anyone could stop her. Naomi cried out, "Miss Elena," but Elena kept walking slow, steady, dignified in her heartbreak. Marcus reached out instinctively, but his hand fell before it touched anything. Evelyn's gaze softened strangely, as if she believed she'd done something righteous. "You needed to hear the truth," she said. He needed to speak it, but Marcus wasn't listening anymore. His breathing had gone shallow. His heart felt like a fist clenched too tightly. He looked around, the staring eyes, the murmuring lips, the judgment dripping heavy in the winter air, and then he looked at Naomi, tears running down her cheeks, confusion twisting her small face. "Daddy, why did you say she's not family?" He couldn't answer, not because he didn't have one, but because none of the answers were ones he could bear to speak aloud. The festival lights blurred. The music resumed somewhere in the background, trying to swallow the tension. But the damage had been done. In one moment of fear, one instinctive retreat, Marcus had shattered the fragile beginning Elena and Naomi had been building, the beginning he'd secretly wanted. And as he held Naomi close, the truth settled on him like the cold evening air. He hadn't lost Elena because she walked away. He'd lost her because he let fear speak louder than hope. And somewhere in the distance, under the soft glow of Christmas lights, the woman who had offered him a future now walked alone into the night. The house felt heavier than usual when Marcus and Naomi returned that night, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the tension from the festival. The moment he closed the door, the silence pressed in dense, unmoving, the kind of silence that followed a wound too fresh to touch. Naomi didn't speak. She didn't kick off her shoes the way she usually did or hang her coat crookedly on the hook. She walked straight to her room, her small shoulders drawn inward as though trying to make herself invisible. The sight pierced him. "Peanut," Marcus called softly. "Do you want to talk?" "No." The answer came quick, fragile, and final. Her door closed, not with a slam, but with a sound far worse, a quiet push. A child shutting herself away because the world outside had suddenly become confusing and painful. Marcus stood in the hallway, unsure what to do with his arms, his breath, his guilt. The festival lights still flickered behind his eyes. Evelyn's accusations, the crowd's silence, Elena's heartbreak in the shape of one single step backward, and then Naomi's voice echoing like a choked question inside him. "Daddy, why did you say she's not family?" He pressed a hand to his forehead. He needed air. He walked into the kitchen, turning on only the small lamp by the sink. The dim light cast long shadows across the counter, making the space feel older, like a memory instead of a room. His wedding ring glinted faintly. He touched it out of habit, then let his hand fall. He wasn't sure what the gesture meant anymore: loyalty, fear, habit, grief, or a mix of all four. He made tea. He didn't drink it. Instead, he sat at the table, staring at the steam until it faded, leaving the mug lukewarm and untouched. The memory of Elena's face haunted him, not just her hurt, but her restraint, how she had walked away without demanding an explanation, how she had shielded Naomi from the worst of the moment by leaving before her own pain spilled out, a kind of grace he didn't deserve. When he finally gathered enough courage to check on Naomi, he found her curled under her blanket, clutching the small white feather she'd given Elena, a feather that, somehow, had found its way back to her hands. Her breath was shaky, not quite sleep. "Daddy," she whispered when she sensed him in the doorway. "Did Miss Elena leave because of me?" He felt the floor tilt. "No, sweetheart, not because of you. Because of what that lady said?" He hesitated. "That was part of it." Naomi's voice thinned to a trembling thread. "But she is part of our family, isn't she?" Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, feeling his chest constrict. "I don't know," he admitted. "I'm trying to understand everything too, but I love her." He closed his eyes. The words landed on him like a soft blow, quiet but devastating. "I know," he whispered. "And she loves you too. Then why didn't you say that?" The question sliced deeper than anything Evelyn had said. "I was scared," he confessed. Naomi finally turned toward him, her cheeks wet. "I wasn't." That innocence, so steady, so brave, shook him. He smoothed her hair until she fell asleep, her breathing slow and uneven. Then he sat there long after her dreams took her away, staring at the feather on her pillow and feeling something inside him crack open. When he finally left her room, the house felt colder, almost unfamiliar. He walked to the living room, turned off the last light, and sat in the dark. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. He just sat there, letting the silence settle into him like dust. Hours passed. The clock ticked. Outside, the neighborhood grew quiet, cars gone, porch lights dimmed, Christmas decorations swaying faintly in the wind. In the dark, Marcus whispered into the emptiness, "What have I done?" The room didn't answer, but his heart did, an ache sharp enough to feel like a wound newly opened. All week, he moved through his routines mechanically. He made breakfast for Naomi. He drove her to school. He fixed wiring for clients who didn't notice how his hands shook when he reached for tools. He answered people's polite questions with carefully practiced masks. But each day, Naomi spoke less. She didn't bring her sketchbook into the living room anymore. She didn't hum Christmas songs. She didn't talk about animals or squirrels or weekend plans. When he asked if she wanted to visit Piedmont Park, she said softly, "Not without her." When he asked if she wanted to bake cookies, she whispered, "Miss Elena was going to help." When he asked what she wanted for dinner, she shrugged and said, "Nothing tastes good right now." People say heartbreak is an adult emotion, but Marcus watched it bloom inside an 8-year-old girl, quiet and heavy and undeserved, and that broke him more than losing Elena. 3 evenings after the festival, he found a small folded paper on his pillow, Naomi's handwriting round, uncertain letters. "I want Miss Elena to be my new mom." Underneath the sentence, she had drawn 3 stick figures holding hands under a Christmas tree. 3 figures that looked very much like the ones in her painting. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, holding the note as his vision blurred. He wasn't crying out of grief. He wasn't even crying out of guilt. He was crying because a child had told the truth he had been too afraid to admit. Elena wasn't just a possibility. She was a piece of something they had already begun to build, even if he'd refused to see it. Grief didn't disappear when new love arrived. Fear didn't vanish when hope appeared. But love wasn't asking him to replace anyone. It was asking him to grow. And for the first time, Marcus found himself asking a terrifying, necessary question. Did loyalty to the past require sacrificing the future? He placed the note on his nightstand, smoothing the edges with trembling fingers. Then he whispered into the empty room, "I can't let this be the ending." The house didn't feel silent anymore. It felt expectant, as if waiting for him to move, to choose, to step into something that scared him precisely because it mattered. He looked toward the hallway leading to Naomi's room, then toward the window that reflected his lonely silhouette. And somewhere inside him, beneath the fear, beneath the guilt, something shifted, something resolved. He stood slowly, breathing in a way he hadn't breathed in years, with intent, because fear had spoken long enough, and tomorrow he would stop letting it. Marcus had replayed the festival scene so many times that it no longer felt like a memory. It felt like a bruise, one that throbbed whenever he tried to breathe too deeply. But after finding Naomi's note on his pillow, something in him had finally shifted. He couldn't continue living between fear and longing. Not when his daughter's heart was quietly breaking. Not when his own heart had finally admitted which direction it wanted to move. He left work early the next day. He didn't tell Denise where he was going. He didn't need another lecture about courage. He'd finally found enough of it on his own. The closer he drove to Elena's apartment, the heavier the winter air seemed to get, thick with possibility and dread. Christmas lights blinked along the edges of buildings, softening the harsh corners of the city. Atlanta felt quieter tonight, like the world was holding its breath with him. He parked across the street and sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, inhaling deeply. "You have to fix this," he told himself. Not for appearances, not for comfort, for truth. When he crossed the street, the cold air stung his face, pushing him forward. He buzzed her apartment number. A long moment passed, long enough for him to wonder whether she'd ignore it. Then her voice came through the speaker, soft, guarded. "Yes? Elena, it's me." Silence. A thick, heavy silence. Then a quiet click as she unlocked the main door. His chest tightened. She didn't have to open the door downstairs. She could have told him to leave. She could have let him stand in the cold, but she didn't. He climbed the stairs 2 flights, his breath unsteady. When he reached her door, it opened slowly. Elena stood there wearing a simple sweater and jeans, no makeup, her hair tied back loosely. She looked nothing like the commanding CEO the world saw. She looked tired, wounded, human. "Marcus," she said softly, "why are you here?" Her tone wasn't angry. It was careful, like she was bracing for more pain. He cleared his throat. "I needed to see you." "Now?" "Yes." She exhaled, stepping aside so he could enter. The apartment was warm, with soft lamps and a faint scent of vanilla. On the coffee table sat Naomi's feather, placed gently inside a small dish, as if it were something precious she didn't know how to let go of. The sight nearly brought him to his knees. Elena folded her arms, a subtle shield. "What do you want to say?" He took a moment to gather his breath. "I owe you an apology." She didn't move, didn't blink, just waited. He continued, voice low, heavy. "I hurt you. I hurt Naomi. And I hurt myself. All in the same moment." Her jaw tightened. "Marcus, you said I wasn't family." "I know. You said it like you meant it." He closed his eyes briefly. "I said it because I was terrified." Something flickered in her expression, recognition, maybe, but also pain. Terrified of what? He swallowed hard. Of being judged, of losing control, of disappointing everyone, of betraying a woman who isn't even here to witness what my life has become. Elena's voice softened, just barely. "Your wife?" "Yes." He ran a hand over his face. "I've lived so long with grief that I don't know how to live without it. And when I saw you and Naomi together, happy, connected, it felt like a door opening, a door I didn't believe I deserved to walk through." "So you closed it," she whispered. "Yes, and you closed it on me." He met her eyes. "On all of us." Her lips parted, but she didn't speak. The silence between them shifted, not cold now, but charged with something deeper. Marcus moved closer. Not too close. Just enough that she could see the truth on his face. Elena, I wasn't rejecting you. I was retreating into the only safety I've ever known." Her voice trembled. Fear. Yes. She looked down at her hands, twisting them slowly. "Do you know what I felt at the festival?" His chest tightened. "Tell me." "Invisible," she said. "Like I'd imagined everything between us. Like I was foolish to think I had a place in your life. And worse, that Naomi had been wrong to trust me." Her voice cracked then, just slightly. "I would never forgive myself if I hurt her." Marcus stepped closer. "You didn't hurt her. I did. By pushing you away." Elena lifted her head, eyes shining with restrained emotion. "Why are you here now, Marcus?" He exhaled the heaviest breath of his life. "Because I realized something." "What?" "Justice isn't always loud," he said softly. "Sometimes it's choosing the people who choose you. And you," his voice caught, "you chose us. Long before I had the courage to choose you back." Tears filled her eyes, not falling yet, suspended like they too were listening. He continued, voice hushed. "Naomi left a note on my pillow last night. She wrote that she wants you to be her new mom." Elena pressed a hand to her mouth, a quiet gasp escaping her. She wrote that?" He nodded. "And it broke me, because I realized I'd rather face every judgment in the world than watch her lose you." Something inside her cracked then softly, like the quiet breaking of frozen ground making room for spring. "Marcus," she whispered. "I'm so sorry," he said, "for what I said, for what I didn't say, for every moment I let fear speak for me." She blinked away the tears that finally slipped free. "All I needed was the truth. Here it is," he said. "I care about you. Deeply. More than I meant to. And I want you in our lives, not as a visitor, not as an uncertainty, but as someone we grow with." He hesitated before asking, "Is there a chance you can forgive me?" Elena stepped closer, her breath unsteady. "If I let you back in, I need to know something. Anything. If they come for me again, your relatives, strangers, anyone, will you stand beside me?" He didn't hesitate. "I'll stand in front if I have to." That answer broke her remaining restraint. Not in a dramatic way, just a soft collapse of tension, her shoulders lowering, her eyes warming, her breath shaking with relief. She moved into his arms slowly, cautiously, like someone allowing themselves to be held for the first time in too long. He held her with equal care, not clutching, not claiming, simply allowing truth to settle between them. After a long moment, she pulled back slightly, her hand resting over his heart. "You showed up," she whispered. "That matters. I'll keep showing up," he said. "Every time." Outside, the winter wind brushed past the windows, carrying distant city sounds. Inside, something fragile and powerful took root, a beginning reclaimed, a wound acknowledged, a future no longer avoided. Marcus looked into Elena's eyes and saw not possibility, but certainty. And for the first time in years, certainty didn't scare him. It grounded him. Because love didn't erase grief. It grew beside it. And he was finally ready to make room. The next morning felt different in a way Marcus couldn't quite name. Not lighter, exactly, but more certain. Like the world had finally shifted into a place he'd been trying to reach for years without knowing the path. He woke early, long before Naomi's alarm, and sat at the edge of his bed staring at the small folded note she had written. "I want Miss Elena to be my new mom." The handwriting was uneven, innocent, honest. A child's truth, unfiltered by fear or pride. He slipped the note gently into his wallet, not to hide it, but to carry it close. When Naomi finally shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from her eyes, he lifted her into a hug so tight she squeaked. "Daddy!" She laughed. "What's happening?" "I'm just happy to see you," he said. And he was. Truly. She blinked, studied his face closely. Children had a way of detecting emotional weather more accurately than any device. Then smiled. "Your eyes look different." "Different how?" "Like you found something you lost." Her words hit him right in the center of his chest. Later that afternoon, he told her, "How would you feel about visiting Miss Elena tonight?" Naomi gasped so loudly the dog next door barked. Yes, yes, if she wants. She wants, he said with a smile. And I think she misses you. Naomi hopped around the living room like a small kangaroo, then ran to her room to draw something super important. Marcus dressed in the same shirt he'd ironed last weekend, the one he'd chosen without admitting why. Naomi insisted on bringing her sketchbook, the white feather, and a box of ginger cookies she had helped bake with Denise. When they arrived at Elena's building, Naomi nearly sprinted up the stairs. Marcus knocked gently. Elena opened the door before the second knock landed. She looked startled, relieved, and emotional all at once. Her gaze fell immediately to Naomi, who threw her arms around her waist in pure joy. "Miss Elena." "Hi, sweetheart," Elena whispered, bending down to hold her. Her eyes shone as she looked at Marcus over Naomi's shoulder eyes that asked 1,000 quiet questions and received their answers in the way he smiled back. They stepped inside. The apartment glowed with warm light, simple Christmas decorations, and a small tree with delicate glass ornaments. Naomi gasped. "It's beautiful." "It needed someone to see it," Elena said softly. Naomi wandered to the tree, inspecting each ornament like an art critic. Marcus and Elena remained near the doorway, a gentle, unspoken pause between them. Finally, Elena broke the silence. "Thank you for bringing her. Thank you for opening the door," he answered. She lifted her eyes to his steady, brave, and no longer guarded. "Marcus, are we okay?" He drew a breath, stepped closer, and lowered his voice to something only she could hear. "We're better than okay." "I mean it." Relief washed through her expression, softening every line. "I was afraid," she admitted. "So was I," he replied. "But fears had enough say in my life." She smiled then, a smile that reached her eyes fully. Naomi interrupted by running over with a drawing. "Miss Elena, I made this for you. It's us. The same family painting, but better." Elena took it with trembling hands. This time, the picture had a few upgrades. Elena's hair was shinier, Marcus looked taller, and Naomi had drawn herself holding both their hands. Above them, she had written, "Together for real this time." Elena pressed the picture to her chest. "This is the most beautiful gift I've ever received," Naomi beamed. "Then you have to keep it forever." "I will," Elena promised. They spent the evening together baking simple Christmas cookies, listening to soft music, laughing when Naomi got flour on her nose. Marcus watched Elena move around the kitchen with a grace that wasn't polished or rehearsed. It was human, gentle, unguarded. The grace of someone who longed deeply for family and had finally allowed herself to believe she might have one. At one point, Naomi fell asleep on the couch with a half-decorated cookie in her hand. Marcus whispered, "I should take her home soon." Elena nodded, but her eyes lingered on the sleeping child with a softness so profound it felt like a prayer. Marcus touched Elena's hand lightly. "Walk me out?" She nodded. They stepped into the hallway, leaving the door slightly ajar so Naomi could sleep peacefully inside. For a long moment, neither spoke. They simply stood in the quiet corridor, breathing the same winter-soft air, their shadows touching on the wall. "Elena," he began, "I know I can't erase what happened. I know I hurt you." "You also came back," she replied. "That matters." "I meant what I said last night," he continued. "You chose us long before I had courage to choose you, and I'm done choosing fear." She blinked, overwhelmed. "Marcus, if we do this, really do this, it won't be easy. Nothing worth building ever is." She stepped closer. "People will judge us. Let them," he said. "Their voices aren't the ones I go home to." She drew a shaky breath. "And Naomi, she'll need stability, real stability." Marcus nodded. "Then we give it to her. Together. If you're willing." Elena looked at him, long, deep, with all the vulnerability she had once tried so hard to hide. "I am," she whispered. He touched her cheek with the back of his fingers, just enough to ask permission. She leaned into the touch, just enough to answer. And then, softly, slowly, He kissed her. It wasn't a desperate kiss. It wasn't a perfect one either. It was a beginning kiss, the kind two grown souls share when they know they've walked through storms and chosen each other anyway. When they pulled apart, Elena whispered, "So, what happens now?" Marcus smiled. "Now we build a family, the one that little girl inside is already dreaming about." Elena laughed through a tear. "She dreams big. So should we." He took her hand as they walked back inside. Naomi stirred awake at the sound of their footsteps. She looked up at them, her voice groggy. "Daddy, Miss Elena, are we all okay now?" Marcus lifted her into his arms. "We're more than okay, Peanut." Naomi leaned her head on his shoulder, looking at Elena with sleepy adoration. "Good," she whispered, "because I asked Santa for us to be a real family." Elena placed a gentle hand on Naomi's back. "Well," she said softly, "I think Santa heard you loud and clear." The three of them stood together in the warm glow of the apartment, the small Christmas tree flickering in the corner, the scent of cookies lingering in the air, the promise of a new beginning settling around them like soft falling snow. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't perfect, it wasn't loud, but it was just, and it was true. A new family, quietly formed, a quiet justice, finally served. And as Marcus held Naomi and reached for Elena's hand, he understood something he'd been afraid to admit for years. Love didn't replace what was lost. It simply gave them the courage to grow beyond it.